Hello and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. I have compiled this short series to accompany my upcoming class that I'll be teaching this spring, but I thought it was some important information about how to treat your artwork once you've made it or in progress making it in terms of finishing, displaying. I'm going to talk about hanging devices, anchoring. This is aimed at wall pieces. Wall pieces end up being more acceptable than having pedestal pieces. And oftentimes that eliminates us 3D artists from being able to apply to a lot of shows because we don't have the wall work. More and more we're starting to see 3D artists create wall pieces. However, those pieces tend to be a lot heavier than what you would find in your paintings or your drawings on paper. I want to talk about those hanging devices, how to install them, how to treat your pieces beforehand, and how to install them even after the fact if you have already made the piece and trying to adapt it with some third-party hangers. In this video, I am going to be talking about just the anchors. As I was preparing all of my supplies, I realized that anchors are definitely its own topic. The first thing you need to know is what kind of wall are you hanging in. Most established galleries will have a plywood backed wall. And I have built y'all a little bit of a wall feature. You can see the back. A plywood backed wall is going to have a sheet of plywood on the wall on its stud before it installs the drywall. Less established places, or maybe like pop-up places, converted spaces, will have most likely just the drywall sitting on your studs. This is going to be your first key factor. You need to figure out whether or not it's going to be a hollow wall or a plywood backed wall. I ran into this situation this past summer. I made these pieces that were going to be displayed on a shelf, but it turned out the gallery had hollow walls. And so I immediately diverted my plan and ended up getting a display table. It was just going to be much easier for me to put them on a pedestal, and I had the ability to do that. I did have some people in that show who had to hang on the hollow wall, and it was not pretty. Someone broke a piece. The wall anchoring situation was not ideal. You really ultimately want to hope for getting a plywood backed wall because this makes life so much easier. You can literally just take a screw, plow it through to the wall, and not have to worry about any kind of anchoring for most pieces. If you have like this insanely heavy piece, then you probably want to throw in an anchor just to be sure. Most pieces under the 100-pound weight will probably be just fine as long as you have the right size screw. Long before my life of teaching, kind of taught along the way, but there was a stint where I was working in galleries for quite some time doing the install, deinstall for different galleries in the area. A lot of times small galleries that don't have a full-on staff will hire someone like me because they only need me once every month or once every couple of weeks as they're turning over shows, and they don't have to put someone on full staff. So it was my job to come in, get the job done efficiently, hang, and sometimes build pedestals. That being said, I have a ton of experience dealing with walls in the perspective of the one who has to do the installing. So this is aimed at you, the artist, who is putting together the pieces. Sometimes you're going to have to install your own pieces. If you're lucky, the gallery will be doing the installing, but you really should still have the knowledge of what it means to do that install. You need to make sure that you adapt your piece properly so that it doesn't end up getting broken, and you want to keep your gallery installer and the gallery itself happy by making sure that you have taken the proper precautions before it's gone off to them. As an installer, the artists in my mind that were a complete mess were the ones who had no idea how to hang and install their artwork. So much so that when I got the opportunity to teach this class, this was the first thing, the first workshop. I was like, I need to make sure they understand how to treat their artwork and how it gets installed in the end. So that's why we're here. If you were to purchase these at Home Depot or Lowe's or at your typical hardware store, number one, you're going to be paying a lot more money than what I paid for these. These are big sets, and usually you're only going to get a small package, anywhere between 2 to 8, depending on the hanger type. But that being said, you will at least have a guideline that tells you how much weight you can put on different types of anchors. Because these don't have that, that may be an issue for you, but I'm gonna walk you through some basic ones that should cover the 60 to 80 pound weight, no problem. If you're gonna be putting up anything that's over 100 pounds, you wanna make sure that you get the ones that you can see what the weightage that it will hold. Honestly, that's a lot of weight to be putting on a hollow wall to begin with, so I would probably try and build yourself a pedestal or try and see if that there's another option when you get up into something that's gonna be that weight on a hollow wall. On a plywood backed wall all day long, you can just go for it. All right. First up, these are probably what you are most familiar with. You can get kits like this one at IKEA, at Walmart, Target, any of your basic box stores will have an anchor kit like this. This is crap. This is the kit that is only good for hanging up those basic picture frame type things. These anchors will take care of that. They will hold some weight. I would probably not go more than about 10 to 15 pounds in weight with these guys. I just don't trust them. They are made out of plastic, and in a minute I'm gonna go in and we're gonna install a bunch of these on the hollow wall so you can see what they look like when the back bursts out. As a general rule, you know, the bigger the screw, the bigger the anchor, the more weight they can handle. Maybe you have a very tiny little ceramic piece or sculpture that's made out of paper mache and that could totally work. Then okay, if we're talking like large, heavier weight items, just avoid these. Next up are your hollow wall anchors. These guys are the ones you really want to go for. These type of anchors, they get popped in. This is the plastic version and these are the metal version. I personally prefer the metal version over the plastic, but the plastic sometimes are cheaper, sometimes it's the only thing you can get a hold of. Again, you can find these in smaller packages and they will give you a weight rating. If you're wall hanging, these will probably be good from 50 to 80 pounds depending on the anchor. There are situations where you can disperse the weight so that the sculpture is getting put on 2 screws, 2 points. So let's say you're hanging a 100-pound sculpture and you've got 2 anchor points to put into it. These 2 anchor points will be distributing that 100 pounds, so you're dealing with 50 pounds on each, and in that instance it's okay if you have a double point on the piece. This is geared towards the wall being a hollow wall in the gallery where you need to adapt, or maybe, you know, in a home residence, a lot of residents, let's say your piece in a residential setting, it's not going to be a plywood backed wall. You're going to be dealing with hanging in a hollow wall situation. These are all pretty much the same. Sometimes they're called butterfly anchors, but otherwise they're known as hollow wall anchors. They go into your wall. You'll be pre-drilling a hole to pop this guy into the wall. These get screwed in. As the screw goes on, the anchor expands and it allows somewhere for it to grab. The same situation happens here. As the screw goes on, this will get tightened, and as it gets tightened, this will crunch and become basically the same thing that was inside the wall and do your holding. Now, these other ones, actually these are my personal favorite, but I have to tell you they're probably the most expensive. I get these at Home Depot. Also, you drill a hole, tap it in. These are a one-time use though, because once I do it, it'll expand pretty much the same way as this. They expand out, this butterflies out into the wall once the screw head is drilled, but then this plastic safety bit pops off and basically it's kind of done for after that. These are 2 different versions of that. Also, depending on how deep your wall is, that's another thing you want to find out. Most residential houses have 5/8 inch drywall. There are some situations where maybe it's a double wall. Depends on the city. Actually, 5/8 inch is East Coast. In California, it only needs to be, I think it was a 1/2 inch. Keep that in mind. There's one other wall situation that we need to talk about before we go into hanging, and that is my friends over here. The redheads and the concrete tappers. I have had this where I have installed in galleries where the wall is only brick or concrete and you're stuck in this situation where you're having to hammer drill into a concrete or a brick wall. Yeah, if you're a sculptor, do yourself a favor and build a freaking pedestal, because hanging in concrete is a pain in the behind. It is not something that you really want to get into if you don't have to. It requires a special hammer drill. There are situations where it'll be unavoidable, so we'll still talk about them. Let's go take a look at the brick wall. If you have some kind of brick wall or concrete wall, you want to be drilling in between the mortar sections. You do not want to be drilling directly into the brick. If you plow into the brick, you compromise compromise the structure of the brick. You have to figure out hanging according to wherever the mortar is. The good news is you have mortar lines running this way, so your center point might be slightly off, but at least you'll hit some straight line that you can be drilling through. The reason why you want to do that here is because you can always patch this with some new mortar without destroying the integrity of the brick. Inside, these guys here are hollow. So there's one, in there is hollow. If you plow holes, you start very easily deteriorating the structure of this. And these are not nearly as strong as you think. One tiny drop and it just completely crumbled. They're strong in this orientation because they're stacked on top of each other. But the moment you start poking holes into these, you're asking for trouble and you could literally bring down a building, which is another reason why I hate doing this. That is if you're dealing with concrete block. This could either be this brick color or gray. Let's have a look at actual brick. Now, in the case of your actual brick, you don't have as much of that issue because the brick is solid. However, look at this foundation. You can already see the stressors in this brick itself. Brick is clay. Brick is another version of clay. It's a stronger clay, but it's still clay over time becoming deteriorated. It's also nearly impossible to replace brick without coming in with a massive saw to come around and chop it out. So again, you always want to aim for the mortar when you're doing this type of installation because the mortar can easily be patched. They sell them at Home Depot or, you know, whatever hardware store. The mortar patch kits, they even come in a caulking gun type of thing, and you just kind of pop it in there and shoot in the mortar to replace or to repair that section. So, point being, stay away from drilling into the solid parts of the brick or the concrete. You're aiming for the mortar, and you're going to use a hammer drill. This is your standard cordless drill. It is a regular cordless drill. I do not actually have a hammer drill because I try to avoid drilling into concrete at all costs. They're also incredibly expensive. With your typical drill, when you pull on the handle, it's going to rotate to spin the bit. A hammer drill does this rotation, but it also has an up and down action where it's literally hammering into and tapping into the concrete or cement, whatever you're drilling into. That action requires a different kind of mechanism in the drill head, which makes it really expensive because it's not only doing a motorized rotation, it also has to have a secondary action. A decent one, they can run anywhere between $200 to $500. However, they are rentable. You can rent one at most Home Depot tool centers. If you're dealing with a gallery setting and they have concrete walls, they should have a hammer drill because they are dealing with this on the ready. These are those types of anchors you could purchase for drilling into that. There are some of these, if you have a lightweight stuff and you are only dealing with inside the mortar and the brick mortar, these will give you really good hold. These do not have that anchoring sleeve. These are tap screws that go in by themselves and are designed to hold into the concrete. I have had experiences where sometimes the mortar is too brittle. These just yank out. In that case, I would take some mortar, squish it in the hole, and stick the screw in and let the mortar harden around the screw so that it would create a good anchor. That's not ideal. Most galleries are not going to be happy about you like mortaring in a screw into their wall. If it is a home resident situation, then you know that's something you discuss. These require special drill bits. You can see this little hammer head that's already pointed there. They are designed to sweep away the concrete or the mortar, which is going to create the dust storm. Your screws usually will say on the package what size drill bit it's recommending. Anchor 3/16 for the size, and then I need a 5/32 bit. Wherever you buy these will probably come together. If you have to drill in a concrete wall, my first go-to is these type of screws before trying to go to the red heads. The red heads are like extreme. Ultimately, you have to put a lot of weight in something and you need a red head. Sometimes this is for like beams up in the air or vertical drilling. Let's say you have some kind of industrial setting where the entire ceiling is made out of concrete. Then you go to these red heads, and these are a bear to install. They have a tap, so in this situation the sleeve is connected to it. This one, the sleeve will expand. These are your tapping anchor situation. You can see it on the package where this gets drilled out. You drill out a hole, this goes in backwards, and then your bolt would be getting bolted. This is usually used for foundations when you are securing house walls to the foundation. If you're on a slab foundation, you drill holes and put these anchors in, and that holds up the side walls of your house. There are situations where maybe you need a bolt, maybe you don't. Again, avoid these situations at all costs. If you don't have to use them, don't. I'm not gonna do a concrete install. I just wanted to talk about them so that you know that they are available. Some of the things you will need for basic anchors is probably a hammer, your drill that has both a Phillips head, driver bit, and some regular drill bit options. Let's go ahead, hammer in, throw in one of these plastic ones. This top half is the hollow wall side. I'm gonna go do this from the side onto that way. The first thing you wanna do is determine what size drill bit you need. If you buy a more expensive kit, they will tell you what size drill bit you need. If you buy the cheaper ones, then you're kind of eyeballing. And the main rule of thumb whenever you're checking, even for screws, hold up your drill bit against the anchor and squint an eye, and if you can see the little barbs coming through, and just the barbs only, then it is the right size. This is a little bit big for my liking. I think this is probably going to be closer to this 1/4 inch. So I'm happy with this. If I squint an eye, I don't know if you can see that on camera, you can see a little bit of the barbs coming through, but not all the way. You're going to pre-drill for this plastic sleeve. We'll go here. Take your sleeve, hammer that in. Follow that up with your screw. Now, as I screw this in, what should be happening is that plastic piece should be expanding. Of course, you're not going to screw your screw head in all the way, right? Because the whole point of getting the screw in there is that you have that position to hang whatever type of hanging mechanism you have going on in your piece. We're going to get into that in another video. But I'm going to leave that 3/4 of an inch and see what kind of expansion I got on the back. We're not going to do the reveal yet. Let's do all of the hanging devices first, and then we'll flip it over and take a look at what it looks like in the wall itself. Let's do the one that I said I like the most. My mind might be changed after this video. Let's see. So this is the hollow wall anchor, this tap one that I enjoy. We're going to go ahead and install that one. Let's go right below it. Now I'm going to back out the screw. Alright, there's that one. Let's go for that hollow plastic one. Nope, not big enough. Alright, you got to increase that drill bit. It's always better to go with a smaller bit and increase the size if you're unsure. That way you don't have to deal with patching. So for these, they came with already kind of cramped down. You gotta pinch it to get it in there. So this one you kind of have to get worked in. I'm not a fan of whatever the heck this is. I already tell you I don't like that one. And your typical butterfly. This one's gonna need a massive hole. Which begs me to wonder why this did not include washers. If the hole has to be that big for this thing to go through, there should be a washer. This is what you get when you order cheap Amazon crap, y'all. And I don't have a bit big enough, so I'm just gonna shimmy this. 'Tis the wrong way to do it, y'all. And that's what I meant, but you should have a washer. Something here, right? Grabbing them. In the case of installing this one, I would probably go grab a washer. Now y'all understand why I don't like this particular one and why I like the one that I normally use. Thankfully, I have access to the back wall. You won't have access. If this happens to you, this is going to just drop off into the bottom. You need to have this installed onto the thing first, and then you've got a washer there at least to do some holding. And I can tell I've torn up the hell out of the back of this drywall with that one. Alrighty, you got your plastic anchor. That one that I said was my favorite anchor that, by the looks of it, does not look like it was long enough to expand in this wall. So I should have gone with that longer one. Then we have that butterfly one, that one that I was fighting with. This is that plastic one. The one that has almost a little too much bounce and give. There you have it. I still think that this would be my favorite if I had just installed a longer version of this. It's less intrusive but stronger than this because it's made out of metal. It's a lot easier to install too. Before we move on, let's deinstall these. So I'm going to take them out and you can see some of the parts end up being stuck in the wall and they stay there and you have to remove them. Other bits will fall into the hollow recesses of the wall when you're done with them. That's another thing you want to think about. When you're removing these things, the wall's not open like it is in my little sample here. So you'd have to have something to hold this up while you're unscrewing, because that bit in the back, as it pulls away from the anchor, you need something to kind of push against. So that hollow little butterfly, this metal bit would have fallen into the wall, and now you have to patch that hole. See if I have that situation with this plastic one. That comes undone, and now you have a plastic anchor bit that you have to deal with. Same goes for that one. And same goes for this one. In these instances, you have two options. You can take one end of your screw and tap it in with the hammer, tap it into the wall, leave it in and plaster over it, or you have to dig the thing out. So to dig the thing out, your flathead screwdriver will be probably the way to go. Try and yank at that. In some cases, it may not be possible. If the thing has expanded, like this one, in this case, see how this is like, does not want to come out, you're going to have to do the method where you try and push it in. Same goes with this one. In those cases, I would take the back end of the screw and your hammer. Trying to do this backwards, a little difficult. Anyway, you get the idea. You're going to hammer that all the way through, or just recessed enough to where you can patch it. At least this one, hopefully you can sort of pull out, which is again another reason why I like these. But that plastic one, it's pretty much stuck on there. I mean, because I have access to the back of the wall, I can pinch it and stick it out. But you won't have that access because you're not going to be on a little display wall like this. Let's go ahead and install some into the plywood and see what happens. And let's have a look at what it looks like from the back. These anchors pretty much did absolutely nothing because you're adding the thickness of the wall and the drywall. I would have needed an extra long anchor system. I did pick the longest I could get, but as you can see, these anchors are just lodged into the plywood and it's holding there. And you would never know this because you're on the other side of the wall thinking, oh, you lodged an anchor in and it's doing something. That one didn't even go through. The plastic one is buried in here, which is pretty much pointless. This other plastic one never made it far enough to expand. The metal one probably expanded a bit into the wood a little bit, but completely unnecessary. You could just throw a screw in because the plywood back wall will hold the screw. It'll probably be a better hold. I'm gonna go ahead and actually just throw a screw in. Less intrusive on the front and didn't even come through the back side. Alright, so the lesson here on the plywood backed walls is that your strength is going to be determined by the screw itself, and the anchors are completely unnecessary, as you can see. All it does is mess up your wall even more versus having this tiny little screw. One little screw, much easier to fill. A lesson for the gallerists who are watching this: back your walls with plywood so that you don't have to be putting in a ton of messy hole things like I did down here and destroyed the wall. The last thing I wanted to mention, when you look at screws and the package and the anchors that do say what kind of weight they're going to hold, they're talking about this kind of pull weight. They're not talking about this kind of pull weight. If you're going into the ceiling, gravity wants to pull down and you have a lot less weight that can be held to what the package says. So in situations where you are drilling up into the ceiling of something, you're not going to be able to hold as much weight as it says, and I would not trust the package. So just keep that in mind. The package weight is for sideways into the wall. Alright y'all, I'm going to call this video here. I have two more videos of the hanging. I'm going to do one where we're going to talk about third-party hanging devices, the actual hanging mechanisms that you'll put on the piece to accompany these anchors. And then I'm going to have a video where I talk about making them in clay directly into the piece. Thank you for joining me. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already. And stick around to watch some other cool things happen over on this channel. Thank you.